Well, hello, my friends. We meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? Sorry about the jacket today. Furnace is broken and it's cold down here. So, welcome to another episode of weird and obscure metal albums, which interest me for some reason. Before we look at the album track by track here today, let's discuss the backstory. Now, if you are unaware who Rick Beato is,
hi everyone, I'm Rick Beato, and today's jam kicking off.
He is a music YouTuber, tone enthusiast, excellent musician, and before his ascent into YouTube fame was a producer of actual real music working for a real music studio. Most of the stuff he produced, mixed, or engineered I had simply just never really heard of. You know, me being like the huge death metal nerd that I am. Although I was surprised to learn that he co-wrote the song Carolina by the country band Parmalee, which I actually always enjoyed that song whenever I was working at the Battery Warehouse in the summers between university classes. They would always play it on like the radio there, and I would listen to that song, and I always thought it was actually pretty good. So I was very, very surprised that Rick co-wrote that. So of course, if you know me or my channel at all, I think it is pretty clear that I'm a huge Rick Beato fan. His videos are a huge inspiration to me, both musically, but also as a YouTuber, right? My deep dives into various metal songs are almost exclusively ripping off his content. By the way, you should go check out those. I got a lot of them. You can check out this playlist right here. Yeah, it's pretty much just me ripping off his What Makes This Song Great series. And actually his video with Alice in Chains' Them Bones turned me into an absolute super fan of that band after kind of rediscovering them through that video. So imagine my shock when I learned that Mr. Rick Beato himself produced one of my favorite sleeper, obscure, weird metal albums of all time. And that would be Fozzy's All That Remains. Actually, you don't need to imagine my shock. I learned of this fact while on stream last Friday.
What? Are you kidding me, Budafuka? It what? Holy shit. It is produced by Rick Beato? Oh my god. Okay.
Which, by the way, boys, I stream every Friday afternoon. Come hang out, listen to some music, come chill. If you're a YouTube member, you get free song requests.
And you were there kind of at the beginning because All That Remains was basically our first original record, right? And the song Enemy, which you actually co-wrote, is still a staple of our live show to this day.
So Fozzy is sort of like a strange band, right? It is the brainchild of pro wrestler Chris Jericho and Stuck Mojo guitarist Rich Ward. Now, Chris Jericho was actually my favorite wrestler back in the day when I was like 12 watching wrestling. You know, first of all, his name was Chris, same as mine. He was also a blonde. He was a heel, and he was billed as being from Canada. Well, actually, he was my second favorite wrestler behind another Chris who was billed as being from my hometown, Edmonton, Alberta, but we don't really talk about him anymore. Now, Chris Jericho isn't pretending to be a metalhead for some sort of clout or anything like that. He is the real deal, playing in bands all through his high school days. And I mean, like, if you ever listen to his podcast, you know that the guy has tremendous knowledge and love for metal as a whole, especially that 80s kind of metal. So it seems that in 2000, Chris had linked up with Rich Ward, who at the time was the guitarist for underground rap metal outfit Stuck Mojo. The two decided to jam and play some cover songs, which eventually led to them playing a few shows. Now, of those two shows, and most likely due to the star power of Chris Jericho himself, who in the turn of the millennium WWF was easily one of the highest guys on the card, right? He was a very, very popular guy. The band was actually signed to a record deal off two shows. The name Fozzy comes from the earlier gimmick of dressing up in costumes and playing covers, coming from the joke name of Fozzy Osbourne. I don't know. And I actually think Chris Jericho's voice is a little similar to Ozzy Osbourne's, but we'll get into that a little bit later when we get into the music. Now, Fozzy would go on to record and release two cover albums, a self-titled and Happenstance, both of which are fine, good records, right? I just don't really give a shit about cover albums. Now, I read through Chris's book doing the research for this video, and it seems that through his own words, and I guess my own perception, is that Fozzy before this album was just never really taken very seriously by people. Of course, in this time period, the early 2000s, being an all-cover band, dressing up in wigs and throwback clothes, and having stage names didn't really help this cause. It sort of made them like a gimmick band, nor did it really seem to break them out of the, oh, they're just Chris Jericho's side project, you know, sort of relegation. To quote Chris from his book, quote, "People were still unsure if we were a legitimate metal band to be revered or a joke to be booed, and the fact that we were still wearing wigs didn't help either. End quote. I also think that around this time, in the early 2000s, Chris Jericho was mainly a heel on TV, right? Which just in wrestling terms is a bad guy, right? In pro wrestling, you have a face who you cheer for and a heel who you boo. That's how it kind of works, right? And so Chris being a heel, you want to boo him, right? But being in a metal band, you don't want to be booed. So it really seems sort of very counterintuitive, as I really think Chris Jericho found it hard to separate him, the wrestler, from him, the metal singer, I guess. Chris and the rest of the band would grind out the early 2000s playing to small crowds all around the US. And for that effort, you really have to respect Chris Jericho's work ethic, but also his love of performing, as often he would book Fozzy shows near where he was wrestling. And so he would wrestle his match and then drive right after to the Fozzy gig. Pretty respectable stuff from a guy who did not need to be performing with Fozzy to make a living, right? And so now this is where Rick Beato comes in. In the early 2000s, Rick was working at Atlanta's Tree Sound Studios, which apparently, according to Chris Jericho's book, this studio had the same soundboard that Rush used to record their magnum opus Moving Pictures. Now, on a side note here, I know Rush isn't really metal and sort of out of the wheelhouse of this channel, but I love Rush, and if you want me to cover them at some point, leave that down in the comments, let me know. And while you're down there, make sure you hit the like button. Liking the video really helps out the channel and the video, I think, more than you think it does. Thanks, boys. You know the vibes. Now, if you look at Rick's production credits before this album, it is pretty clear that he had put in some serious work producing, mixing, and engineering several albums before getting to do this Fozzy record. So it's clear that Rick had some previous credentials and wasn't just some random guy, right? He always talks about it in the 90s, all his connections and gigging with people, right? So it makes sense to me that Rick was chosen here. I think he had known some of the Stuck Mojo guys from before. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned Stuck Mojo before on his channel, but I'm not going to go dig through hundreds of hours of videos just to find one sort of offhand reference, but pretty sure he's mentioned Stuck Mojo, and maybe he knew these guys, and maybe that's why he was chosen to be the producer on this record. But maybe he was just the guy who was free and had time to do it at Temple Sound Studios, It's funny, as even when Chris Jericho did an interview with Rick Beato on his channel a few years ago, they didn't even mention this album at all. Didn't even get into the recording of it at all. Just so strange. And actually, in his book, in the part regarding the recording of All That Remains, Chris Jericho never even mentions Rick Beato by name. Which, I mean, to be fair, this book was released in 2013, long before Beato's ascended to YouTube fame, but I just found that funny, just not even mentioned his name at all. So then in 2004, Fozzy would go to Temple Sound Studios with Rick Beato as their producer to record their debut, non-joke, non-gimmick, not a cover band, all original album, All That Remains. And according to Chris Jericho, Rich Ward apparently wrote most of the music for the album. Jericho and his friend would provide lyrics and suggest changes to some of the melodies or the songs. And curiously enough, actually, Rick Beato himself gets a writing credit on the song Enemy, which is easily one of the best songs on this album, but again, we'll talk about that song a little bit later on. Curiously enough, Jericho had this to say in his book about Rick, quote, "Our producer was a friend of Megadeth's guitarist Marty Friedman, who agreed to lay down a solo for the song Born of Anger," end quote. So it seems that while Rick was maybe not very well publicly known at the time, he was a seriously well-connected guy. He's very personable. That's why his YouTube channel pops off, right? And you really have to appreciate him being so well connected sort of behind the scenes even before his ascent into stardom, right? And including Marty Friedman, there are several guest musicians here, including Miles Kennedy and Mark Tremonti from Alter Bridge, who were at the same time recording in the same studio in Atlanta, which in a very coincidental way had another weird WWE connection, as they would have been recording their debut Alter Bridge album, One Day Remains. That album contained Metalingus, right? A song that wrestler Edge would use as his entrance theme, I think to this day. One of the most iconic themes of all time, to be honest. So I wonder if Jericho had any part in pitching that song, maybe he heard that in the studio. I don't know, who knows? Zakk Wylde also makes a guest appearance, as does Atlanta rapper Bone Crusher, but we will get to all those features when they appear on the songs. So other than that, really, precious little is available for information about the recording of this album. Neither Chris Jericho or Rick Beato ever really seemed to talk about it or even mention this album. So if either of you see this video, I would love to see an episode where maybe you guys together go through the album and talk about it. That'd be really cool, but Of course, maybe it has been mentioned once or twice in a podcast or a live stream and it's just been buried, but again, I'm not going to go through hundreds of hours just to find one small morsel. Regardless, we have Fozzy, All That Remains, a metal album produced by our boy Rick Beato, which was self-funded and was released on Fozzy's own record label, Ash Records. So, let's get into the music now, shall we? Well, first off, I must say that the band did a really great job of recording this album. All the performances are very, very tight, especially Rich Ward's rhythm guitar playing, which I have to give the utmost credit to him for. His riffs and the rhythm playing absolutely hard carry this album, and almost every song is packed with at least one or two really, really memorable riffs. Rich Ward also does backing vocals on several songs, including a few harsh vocal sections as well. I'm unsure if Rich contributed any solos, as it seems that Ryan Malum is credited as lead guitarist here, but maybe he did, and it's just not really mentioned. Bass is played by Sean Delson, and he holds down the low end very nicely, and I really, really like his little bass solos you get every once in a while, but other than that, nothing too exciting. Just mostly locking horns with the guitars. Honestly, that's fine. You know, not every album needs a Steve DiGiorgio on it. Drumming is just okay as well. He particularly likes this sort of like open, close, squelch hi-hat groove, which he uses in several songs. You know, drumming holds it down and occasionally blesses us with some great double bass playing, but otherwise just a real good, solid had performance here, right? Chris Jericho rounds out the lineup here, and his singing goes from good to decent. To me, he has a very Ozzy Osbourne type of singing voice, you know, not the greatest range, but he can effectively use his voice in that register really well. And similar to Ozzy, he has that same sort of double tracking with maybe some sort of chorus on his voice as well. You know, go listen to an Ozzy record and listen to this and you can tell that it's produced the same way. I've always liked how Ozzy had his vocals produced, and so I wonder if this was actually Rick's doing, as on the two previous Fozzy records, Chris Jericho's voice is much more traditionally produced, right, with just like a single vocal track. Here, pretty much everything is doubled in that same sort of Ozzy way. So I do wonder if that was Rick's suggestion to record vocals that way, you know, make it sound great, right? Chris, to his credit, he's a very solid singer, doesn't do anything offensive, but doesn't blow my socks up either. Just another real solid hand performance by him here. And so with 10 tracks clocking in at a brisk 41 minutes, this album flies by, and honestly, it sounds fantastic as the production, mixing and mastering sounds great, as this album is just very full and very thick sounding. I actually kind of love the production here. No complaints. This album sounds fantastic for coming out in 2004, and with these runtimes, it's a very lean album as well. But with all that out of the way, let us get into the first track here, and that would be Nameless Faceless, which features Miles Kennedy. This song starts off the album with a bang, brief little high and low pass filtered intro, which then explodes into Rich Ward's excellent riffage. This song exemplifies something that Rich Ward is extremely good at, and that is his squealies or pinch harmonics. Whatever you want to call it, right? And apparently, according to Chris Jericho's interview with Rick Beato, seeing Rich Ward record this album kind of brought Zakk Wylde back into metal. I don't know. Listen to this clip.
He also does the best pinch harmonics. It's like,
which is where Zakk got inspiration to start doing his. I think it was John Sykes, and then he got out of it for a while, and then Stuck Mojo came out, and Zack's like, I got to get back into it. This guy's taking my crown here. So that is Rich Ward, like you said.
One thing you have to say about this album is that there is very little fat left on these songs. Runtimes are very short, and each song just delivers exactly what it needs to be, with almost no filler or nothing extra on it, right? And this is probably in large part to the influence of Rick Beato. As funny enough, structurally, a lot of these songs are very similar to his hit Carolina a few years later. Very cool. Nameless Faceless is no exception to this. At just under 3.5 minutes, the song absolutely flies by. It rips. Great track here. Chris Jericho sounds excellent on the song. The vocal melodies are right in his wheelhouse, and I actually think that the lyrics to this song are pretty good, right? The first verse in particular, I think, is great. Quote, "See the broken man torn and twisted in grief, screaming to the sky in pain and disbelief. How could it be that any man could allow this? living in the filth of faded innocence. Through it all, the hearts of men grow colder, numb to the world as the cowards get bolder. Yesterday's success succeeds in tainting the mindset, and still we wonder where those good old days went. Really great lyrics here. I am unsure what exactly the song is about, but I love the line about, quote, yesterday's success succeeds in tainting the mindset, end quote. A very, very powerful and inspiring line, and I think this might be the only metal song I've ever heard use the word mindset in. This song also does a great job with Miles Kennedy, right? He sings the lines, and I am nameless. And it fits really, really well, as Miles is a great, powerful high tenor voice. And I feel like if Jericho sung those lines, it wouldn't nearly be as powerful. I love this song. It's fast, memorable, catchy, a lot of riffs, and it's short enough and brief enough to leave me wanting more. This song gets a "yeah, buddy, it's on now" from me here, boys. Now, Enemy is the next song up, and like I mentioned earlier, this is the song that was actually co-written by our boy Rick Beato himself. And honestly, it's an absolute banger. Enemy falls neatly into that sort of 2000s post-grunge, butt rock, alternative metal category that others such as like Creed, Seether, and Crossfade, and maybe Default sort of fall into. But Fozzy leans like a little bit harder into the metal side. The focus here is on that big triumphant chorus, which is contrasted by the more restrained verse sections, right? The classic butt rock, clean verse, the heavy chorus. And honestly, it just works fantastically. In my mind, this song should have easily been like a huge radio hit along with the other classic bangers of this era. And right, it was a minor hit, even complete with a very 2005 music video about a guy with one leg getting cucked, essentially, and then struggling to climb up a building after being cucked. And after he makes it to the top, he just throws himself off the building. I don't know, there must be some metaphor in there. Truly, this is a video of the 2000s. But as Chris explains in his book, that payola was still very alive and well at this time. So rather than pitching the song to major rock radio stations, which would cost them a lot of money, they focused on smaller markets, which proved to be moderately successful. But yeah, this song slaps. The chorus is absolutely fantastic. And the pre-chorus is maybe even better. I really love that stomping, determined feel of the pre-chorus. And then when they move into the chorus itself with those huge held chords that are way higher up, it just really feels so triumphant, inspiring, and vindictive. I love it. Chris Jericho sounds excellent in the chorus here as well, maybe one of his best performances. In the bridge of the song, we even get Rich Ward himself getting a spotlight vocally. And he does a great job. Bro has a really great and powerful voice, and I wish they would have actually used him more vocally, kind of like how Alter Bridge and Creed both do it with Mark Tremonti. Pure banger, great lyrics, great message, very triumphant song. Love it. It gets a...
oh yeah, it's all coming together.
From me, boys. Wanderlust is the third track on the album, which also happens to feature Squealy King himself, Zakk Wylde. Now, curiously, the song starts off extremely heavy with this like huge scream from who I can only assume is Rich Ward, as nobody else is credited as doing vocals on here. And I can't imagine Chris Jericho doing that, as he would probably do it more and talk about it. But, the song is interesting. It sort of feels like two different songs glued together without much thought. And I guess just having like a common lyrical theme. Here they go with the Unforgiven song formula, right? Which is, of course, heavy-ass verse contrasted with a light chorus. That sort of dichotomy. But while the Unforgiven's light and heavy sections share the same dark tone, right? That is the very serious and dark mood that the song sets. Wanderlust's chorus just feels sort of out of place. It's too happy and too major key and too, I don't know, not just right for this song, right? It just sort of feels out of place compared to the verses, which are very dark. The rest of the song, right, it's heavy as hell, playing these very typical metal, Phrygian feeling riffs. The verse riff is pretty cool with that sort of odd chugging rhythm syncopated with the drums. Yeah, it's kind of unusual rhythm there and it's pretty cool. Again, a lot of these parts individually are very novel and interesting, but together it just doesn't really fit. Zakk Wylde's solo is just okay, nothing to write home about. This is like the first blemish on this record, which thus far has been excellent. Not a great track. I give Wanderlust The title track follows it up at number 4 on the track listing here. I actually think this is another really, really excellent track. I love the much darker mood of the song. It's so brooding and mysterious. And I love how they just go straight into the verses as well. No lollygagging around here, just right into it. And like I said, there's just very little fat on this record, which you have to appreciate. Great lyrics as well, as the song is describing a man looking back at what remains of his life, his obliterated life, which I think seems to mention like a failed relationship of some sort. Great stuff here, and this may be the best that Chris Jericho sounds on this album. His voice, combined with those clean chords that Rich is picking during the verse, is just absolutely keynote. The drums and bass really help keep up the momentum here. Kind of reminds me of the Creed classic My Own Prison, right? That sort of vibe. The chorus then kicks back in with the distortion, and we get a really solid chorus here as well. Really interesting guitar rhythms and layered leads during the chorus. Really sells it for me. And I love that really tasteful little solo that comes out of the first chorus. Great song, even if the end sort of drags on a little bit, but I have to appreciate the little bass solo that they fit in there. Really enjoy this song as well. It gets a...
just so lovely. I'm really loving the sound.
From me. Now, The Test is the next song up, and well, I have to ask you guys, can one riff carry an entire song? The answer is kinda. Sort of. Not really. If you listen to the first 20 seconds or so of the song, you will just have heard everything the song has to offer, basically. I love that little Seven Dust little sounding intro before it slams right into this ripping, absolutely fantastic riff. Here, I'll play it again for you guys. This riff is just so simple yet effective, and really adding to this riff is the drums. Playing that same open squelched hi-hat beat I mentioned before, it really makes this riff very stank face inducing, very staccato. I love that little pause at the end of each measure as well. It's just so satisfying, especially after the choruses where they add in that little voice sample, you know, this is only a test. That works just so cool, and that's such a great hook. However, beyond this riff, the song really doesn't have much else to offer, really. The verse is just sort of weird and meandering, and honestly, the chorus is just kind of contrived. To me, the bridge sounds like they literally stole it from a Crossfade song as well. I don't know, the rest of the song just does not do that opening riff justice, unless their goal was to make the rest of the song so mid and forgettable that when that excellent riff comes back a few times, it really stands out, but probably not, hey. A little bit disappointing. I'll give this song
What is that? Oh my god.
but I give that riff a...
Yeah, buddy. It's on now.
And this riff easily gets riff of the album here for me, boys. So, riff of the album in The Test. Next up, we have It's a Lie, which features the Atlanta rapper Bone Crusher.
Are you scared? Are you scared? Because they live off your pain and they live off your struggle. You scared?
This song is another strange one. In addition to Bone Crusher, there's a female vocalist featured here as well, but I honestly have no idea who she is, as she isn't credited anywhere at all, at least in what I've seen. To me, this song is just sort of all over the place. There's this cool intro with that "you scared" repeated over and over, and it really makes you think the song is gonna be like a crazy new metal, rap metal banger. But then it just sort of loses all the momentum with this like subdued Chris Jericho singing part. Which then just gets thrown back to Bone Crusher with a very typical new metal riff. Which to its credit, it's pretty decent, right? But to me, for his part, Bone Crusher does an okay job, but I don't really think he's saying anything of substance, and all I hear is someone trying his best to be DMX. It's just okay, I don't know. Then we have this bridge section with Season bringing this very beautiful voice from this unknown singer, which is then followed by like a very epic harmonized metal bridge. This metal bridge would have been better in like Lazarus or maybe like The Test or something. I don't know, this song is just sort of all over the place and lacks any real defining hooks. Like, I've listened to the song many times before this review and for this review during it, and even now I struggle to remember how this song goes. It's just sort of a mess, forgettable, and perhaps worst of all, it's just bland. It gets,
What is that? Oh my God.
from me. Days of the Week comes next at number 7. Now this song reins in the band back from those last two kind of all over the place, more experimental, new metal-y songs, I guess you could say, and places them squarely back into their post-grunge wheelhouse. The only problem that this song has is it's just sort of hookless and forgettable. Like, there's nothing offensively bad here, kind of like It's a Lie, right? Or for The Test. It's just sort of like boiled chicken breast bland. The best part is the bridge section, which actually kind of bangs. But I mean, how often do you ever listen to like a very mid song just for the bridge? Almost never, and it's like just okay, right? You know, they should have used this bridge section as the chorus in this song or something like that. Lyrically, though, the song is actually pretty interesting. It's basically a Creed song as it sort of dances around Christianity and spirituality in a way that both Christians, agnostics, and atheists can all relate to, which is cool, as seeing that Jericho is a huge Striper fan, which is Omega based. Probably took some inspiration from that, I bet. But even that and a decent bridge can't save the song just from being forgettable as hell. I'll give this one a...
They can't seriously expect us to swallow that tripe.
Now up next we have The Way I Am, which features our boy Mark Tremonti. Which, by the way, did you know that Mark Tremonti made an entire Frank Sinatra tribute album with him singing the Frank Sinatra? And it's actually pretty goddamn good. Me neither. Let's focus on the task at hand here, guys. So this song starts out extremely similar to All That Remains, right? But luckily for us, they change it up pretty quickly. As the first verse starts, they move into this really cool and unique sounding like shuffle riff is the best way I can describe it. I don't know, it's very unusual and sort of groovy and makes me want to like shake my hips, which honestly I don't think I've ever really heard before. Sort of feels like a bluesy or maybe like a bluegrass shuffle or something like that. I'm not really sure, guys. Take a listen and let me know what you think here.
Seems like the world was taken from me.
Now, the rest of the song is very enjoyable as well. I really enjoy the chorus here, as well as the way they lead into the chorus. It's just very satisfying, right? It sort of feels like the band falls into the chorus. It's almost like someone is falling back into his old ways, accepting it's just the way he is, the way I am. Cool stuff. I love the dueling solos at the end here, as they also do this underneath some sort of like shuffle riff rhythm. Both of them are cool. I'm unsure which solo was Mark Tremonti's. Decent, enjoyable track with some unique riffage. This song gets a
I just think they're neat.
from me. Lazarus is the penultimate song here, and it's the most traditionally metal song on here, I guess. Pretty goddamn good, if I must say. I really love how the song begins right into that harmonized lead. Really great stuff. Decent singing from Jericho here as well. Even though the song is in a higher key than most of the other tracks here, he does a really great job. He doesn't strain. It's just, yeah, it's good, right in his wheelhouse. Verses are pretty good, and I really like that bouncy pre-chorus riff. And the chorus here is great. I love how later on in the left speaker, they sort of layer in this guitar playing this cool, like crunchy arpeggio. Really adds some grandiosity and sincerity to the chorus. That's when combined with Jericho's great singing, makes a very enjoyable chorus here. Pretty interesting lyrically here, as well as Lazarus, as told in the Bible, right, was a man who was restored to life after 4 days of death by Jesus, right, to extremely oversimplify it. Lyrically, right, the song is essentially saying that in times of despair, failure, and crisis of faith, you must look back at your own life, your own accomplishments, and use that to feel your rebirth, your reinvigorating of your thumos, I guess, so to speak. To become your own Lazarus. Pretty cool stuff. This could have easily been like a Creed chorus here, and boys, let me tell you, that is a great thing. I love Creed. Quote, when your truth turns to lies, and the pain makes you cry, and the fountains of faith run dry, take a look at yourself and what you've sacrificed. End quote. Enjoyable song, one of my favorites on this album. I give it a...
Just so lovely. I'm really loving the sound.
Now, finally, we arrive at the closer song here, Born of Anger, which definitely is the heaviest track here. But boys, let me tell you, heavy does not always mean good. We get more Rich Ward screaming here, and honestly, I really like his screaming voice. I think they should have used it more. Again, more Rich Ward, he's great. Very heavy. Reminds me a lot of Matt Heafy from Trivium here, and that sort of very like round sound. And actually, interesting enough, they use the harsh vocals for the chorus here. Jericho goes on the verses over top of kind of a generic kind of thrashy riff. I don't know, it kind of sounds like a riff that would have been on that Voodoo Cult album I reviewed a while back, which, if you are enjoying this video, you should definitely go check out that review after. That's a very interesting album as well. The problem here, again, is that there really isn't any real hooks, right? The chorus is a hook, but it's not great. You know, the song's heavy, but it's not heavy enough to be its own hook. And it sort of has this unique Eastern Phrygian feel, only sometimes, not throughout the whole song. I don't know. The best part is, unironically, Rich Ward screams on the chorus. Great stuff, super heavy. Everything makes me want to whisper scream along with it. You know what it is. You know what I mean. Now, this is the solo in which Rick Beato managed to finagle Marty Friedman into doing a solo for them, which I assume was a second solo. It's not noted anywhere, but that sounds like Marty's solo. I mean, right? It's a decent solo. It's no Tornado Souls or Victory, but it's very cool. Honestly, I don't think I've ever really been blown away or cared that much about a guest solo. I don't know. It's kind of mysterious, fits right into Marty's vibe, but I mean, like, other than that sort of novelty and curiosity, the song is just sort of unremarkable. You know, Jericho describes the song in his book as a, quote, Bay Area thrasher, but I'm sort of just sitting here wondering, if it's a Bay Area thrasher, then where the hell are the riffs? I think it would have been cooler to get Marty to do a solo on a song like The Test, or maybe Lazarus or something like that, rather than this song. I don't know. It's just a decent song, but it kind of ends the album on a sad, wet fart. I give this album a...
They can't seriously expect us to swallow that tripe.
Alright, so... that is Fozzy's All That Remains. It's a very solid record. Definitely worthy of a listen if you're a fan of that early 2000s post-grunge / metal scene. We have some real highlights here like Nameless Faceless, Enemy, All That Remains, and Lazarus. And of course, right, we can't forget that riff from The Test. But ultimately, like, those songs are sort of weighed down by a lot of sort of like weird new metal experiments, which didn't really play out that well and lack the real memorable and hooky moments, which make the others that I mentioned previously great. What makes those songs great, so to speak. With that being said though, those tracks aren't completely unlistenable, right? Instead, they just aren't nearly as good as the others. Regardless, All That Remains certainly does its job in sort of like establishing Fozzy as a real band with some actual credibility and some original bangers. And honestly, I bet if this had a major label release and got on some more rock radio stations, this album could have performed really, really well. For me, I'll give this entire album a...
Yeah, buddy. It's on now.
And there we have it, boys. We have the time Rick Beato produced an album, a metal album with a WWE wrestler. And who would have ever guessed it was actually pretty good? If you have any other weird, notable metal albums you'd like to see me cover here, leave it down in the comments. And if you have ever heard this album before, what did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. I've been Varvis. Cheers.